What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Thanks for checking out another episode of Casting Campfires. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube and thinking, what are you talking about? Another episode. Welcome back to the show. You've never done anything like this before. Why do you have a microphone? What's going on? Well, I usually record an audio-only podcast called Casting Campfires that I post to Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all that good stuff. And I decided last week that was pretty silly, honestly, because I have a camera, and why would I not post video as well? So why not kill two birds with one stone? YouTube video podcast and audio podcast as well. So I set up the camera and hooked up the microphone, and here we go. We're going to do this on a regular basis. Whenever I record the podcast, I'll do the video as well, because honestly, that's how podcasts are kind of going, is video and audio options for everybody. So that's what I'm going to do as well. I'll probably just have to figure it out as I go. So bear with me. Audio listeners, don't worry. I'm not going to abandon you for YouTube or the video podcast world. You'll still get your audio podcast as well. But I'm just going to add a video element to it, and hopefully that'll just expand it, make it better, and just give me more options for creating content and distributing it to you guys. So I hope you guys like this. Without further ado, let's jump into the video segment, or not the video segment. Let's jump into the podcast that I have planned for today. That was the video introduction segment. I've got everything like in my brain, it's just scrambled eggs right now with so much going on. But let's get into the podcast episode that I have for you today, and that is my favorite topwater lures. I've got 3 lures here in a little tackle box that I want to go over with you guys, talk through a little bit about why I like these topwater lures, why I chose them, what I like about them, some of my dislikes, all that good stuff, because it's starting to be topwater season. So as the spawn kind of ends and warmer weather comes early in the morning, late in the evening in general, there's other times as well. There's no real rule book, right? But in general, early mornings, late evenings, you can get on a good topwater bite as fish are kind of chasing a little bit more. They're not kind of up on the banks as much. They're a little bit more mobile, a little bit more active until it warms up and they go down deep or hug in tight to structure, so you can really get on a good topwater bite. So I want to go over my 3 favorite topwater lures with you guys, starting with the plopper, or the plopping style bait. For the audio listeners, I've got a Berkley Chopo 75, just their standard sized plopping style bait, or whopper plopper, Guggen revolver. Any of those will work. I just like the Berkley Chopo. I like the hard tail versus the whopper plopper with the soft tail. I like just the action. I like the size. They've got some good color options. I think they have great hooks, even though if you saw my Instagram recently, I caught like a 3-ish pounder, maybe just over 3 pounder on a Chopo on Memorial Day weekend, and it just took the front treble clean off, like snapped it at the O-ring, just snapped it clean off. So, I mean, that aside, I still think they're great hooks. That fish just happened to catch it just right. It snapped the hook right off. But the thing I like about a plopping style bait is it is a power fisherman's topwater dream. Now, what I mean by that is you can make hundreds of casts in a relatively short amount of time, cover a ton of water, and still get bites as much or more than a lot of other topwater baits, because it's erratic and because it's throwing a lot of water, it's making a lot of noise. It's attracting a lot of fish, right? I caught a couple of fish, again, over Memorial Day weekend on a Chopo in probably 5, 6 to 8 feet of water, something like that. And it drew those fish up. We had seen them on the sonar, and they were kind of suspended just above the bottom, maybe a few feet. And it drew them up to the surface to attack this lure. So because it's loud, because it's kind of big, because it displaces water, makes noise and all that good stuff, it can draw fish up from relatively deep water to get, a good bite. So you don't have to just chuck this thing close to the bank, close to cover. You can kind of just fish it in open water. Now, I probably wouldn't throw it in, 15 plus feet of water, but anything, 12 feet deep and up, I think that it can draw the fish in and get those bites. And like I said, you can cover a lot of water. It's a great just like chuck and wind type of lure. So if you got a beginner angler with you, or you are a beginner angler, it's a great option for a topwater lure, because there's no technique or finesse that really goes along with it, which most topwaters there are. A lot of topwaters, you have to have some sort of technique in working the bait, and a plopper, you just don't. You throw it out, cast it out as far as you can, reel it in at a steady speed to keep it plopping, and the fish will attack it. It's, in my opinion, it's a great starter topwater lure. It's my favorite topwater lure, my number one lure, because of those reasons. It's got some drawing power. It's good just about any time of year, really. There are times where it kind of, excels, but for the most part, it's a year-round type of lure that you can throw just about any time, and it's great for beginners. There's no real technique that goes into it. You just make lots of casts with it, and you can still catch fish. So that is my number one topwater lure, is a plopping style bait, or a plopper. We could call it a prop bait too, I guess. Moving on, my next one is going to be a popper. This is the BioSpawn. I think it's called the BioPop. Don't quote me on that. I think it's called the BioPop. It's a relatively new one, so I got a couple of them, or pre-ordered a couple of them and got them just recently. Haven't even used them yet. I've always used like the Pop R, the Guggen Blooper. I think those are the only two that I've really used. I've used like the Bass Pro XPS ones too. They're pretty good. They're not quite as good a quality. These though, again for the audio listeners, it's just the BioSpawn popper in a bone color. That looks really good. It looks really, really good. I think that that's going to be a really good quality popper. The hooks, I'm not so sure about the hooks on them. I've used some BioSpawn hard baits before, but never really caught a ton of fish on them with the rattle trap lipless crankbait. Soft plastics are great. They're hard baits though. I don't really know a whole lot about. I love the design of this. I love I think the length is like 2 1/4 inches, something like that, and it's like 3/8 or a ½ ounce. So it's a big enough popper that you can really, you can throw it on a bait caster, and you could really chuck it out there and get some distance on your cast. The thing I like about the popper is it's a great finesse way to fish topwater. Now, what I mean by that is there's a lot of different ways or techniques you can fish a popper, right? You can fish it kind of like a jerkbait, where you pop, pause, and then you're reeling up most of the slack in between your pops. You can walk it more like a walking bait, where you're just constantly popping it and reeling, to keep just that tiny bit of slack in the line to make it walk a little bit. You can almost straight retrieve this thing. Now, I wouldn't straight retrieve a popper as just a general practice, but you can, I guess. You can chug it at least a little bit. You can give it some like big chugs, right? So if you think about it, you've got your rod out in front of you. If you give it like, if right out in front of you is 12 o'clock and you give it like a big drag over to 3 o'clock, it'll give a big push of water that you can then, kill and then let it sit. And then maybe do this, reel up the slack and then do the same thing. There's just lots of different ways you can work a popper. And the reason I say it's finesse is because you can let it sit, right? You can throw it out, you can pop, and then pause 30 seconds if you feel the need to. I usually pause for 5 to 8 seconds, something like that, 10 if I really think I need to. And then a lot of times I'm kind of like walking this bait a little bit, not quite the same speed or cadence as a walking bait, because you're not trying to get it to walk and dart. You want it to kind of slowly do that and pop the water as you're working it. So slightly different technique, but that's how I tend to work this a lot more is, more quicker pops, almost like it's walking, but not quite. So this is not as beginner of a lure. It still is. You can fish this as a beginner. It's still very easy. There's not a whole lot of technique or cadence or rhythm you have to have for it. But it more than the plopper. So, you got to take that in consideration. Oh, before I forget and just keep moving on and keep forgetting, with the plopper, I'm throwing it on a bait caster with most likely going to have monofilament line. The size of the line is up to you. I don't really get too much into like the different, pound test of line or that type of deal. But usually on a bait caster, monofilament line, some kind of rod that's either medium, moderate, or medium, moderate, fast, something along those lines. But a medium rod to give me a little bit more bend and a little bit more play. I love throwing this on my cranking combo. So my crankbait combo that has a really telescopic rod that bends really deep into the rod. I love throwing Topwater or the plopper. Yeah, plopper. On that combo. With the popper, I'm primarily throwing it on spinning gear because I just want to have a little bit more control. It's usually a little bit shorter rod so that when I'm popping it down, I'm not hitting the water. I'm a smaller guy. I've got short arms. So that shorter, spinning gear kind of helps me to work the bait a little bit better. You can throw this on bait casting gear though. Like I said, with this BioSpawn one, it's heavy enough. It's big enough. You could throw it on bait casting gear. If you did bait casting gear, I would use kind of the same combo as the plopper. Monofilament line, medium, moderate, medium, fast rod on that because it's kind of the same type of lure in that it has double treble hooks, right? Double treble hooks. It has 2 treble hooks on it. So that medium rod or that moderate action is going to give you a little bit more flex to, pin those treble hooks instead of ripping it out of the fish's mouth. On my spinning gear, I always have braid to fluorocarbon. It's just my preference. It's always thinner. So right now I have 30-pound braid on my main spinning combo, which this might be a little bit too heavy, but this is what I've got because it's what I had in the garage. I have 30-pound braid to 10-pound fluoro. That's just what I have. Ideally, I would have something like 10 to 20-pound braid with 8 to 10 or 12-pound fluoro. But that's just what I have on it right now, and that's what I throw the popper on primarily. And moving on to my final top favorite topwater bait, it is, of course, the frog. If I made this video and did not say the frog, then it really wouldn't be doing topwater lures justice. You can't make a topwater video and not talk about the frog. I have a stretch of the river that I fish routinely that is completely covered with lily pads. As soon as the weather warms up and spring has sprung, those lily pads just cover this section of the river all the way back into this little creek arm. And I do not leave the house without one of these. Now, this is the Sixth Sense Vega frog. It's the poppin' one. I don't really use a poppin' frog if there's thick vegetation or mats like that. I'll use a walk-in frog. But a poppin' frog, if there's sparse grass, sparse lily pads, which there are in some sections, they're kind of spread out or isolated. I'll throw one of these poppin' frogs to get a little bit more action, a little bit more just water blooping, kind of like a popper, just to draw some more fish's attention. If I'm fishing those heavy, like grassy areas, mat areas, padded areas, I'm primarily just throwing a walking frog all the way up into it, and then just walking that frog across the top of it, pausing it in those little openings where the water is, obviously, right? Because if your frog is on the pad and then you hop it off of the pad into water and let it sit, that's when a fish is going to key in on it and attack it. Key with a frog. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into like a lot of the techniques or whatever. Key with a frog is not to set the hook too early. It's our reaction, right? It's our natural instinct to see a blow up on the top and just yank the rod, right? And what happens is, and I've done this too many times, you actually yank the frog out of his mouth. This frog has 2 big hooks in it. When the fish bites it, it pushes them down like that, and then those hooks penetrate the lip, right? That takes a second or two for that to happen. So when that frog comes up and when that fish comes up and blows up on your frog, you do not want to immediately set the hook because you're just going to pull it out of its mouth. You have to wait until that fish gets the frog down in its mouth and then set the hook, so that those 2 hooks, because they're bent down into the frog to make it weedless, it takes a minute for them to get in position. Not a minute, it takes a couple seconds, right? For them to get in position to where when you do set that hook and you want to set the hook like a maniac on a frog, it gets in the roof of its mouth and it does not come dislodged. One of the things I've noticed about frogs, when I catch them on frogs, it is hard to get the hooks out sometimes. But that's good. That's what you want, because that means they're not going to go anywhere. They're not getting off of that hook and going to spit it, because you know that they're going to try to spit it with a lure like this. Frog, I have my own dedicated frog combo. Now I throw heavy jigs and heavy Texas rigs and punching rigs on it as well. So it's like my flipping and pitching stick, but I use it for frogs primarily. It's a 7'3" heavy fast with a high speed gear ratio reel on it, bait casting reel. I think mine's an 8.5 to 1, might even be a 9 to 1 Shimano. And that thing, it just helps me pick up line fast, because when that frog goes, you want to pick up line, get it out of wherever it is, out of the grass, out of the mats or the brush or wherever it's at. You want to get that fish out of there. So I also put 50-pound braid to a 20, it might be 17. I'll have to go check. But a 17 to 20-ish pound fluorocarbon leader if I'm throwing jigs, Texas rigs, pitching, flipping. If I'm in heavy stuff like that and I'm throwing a frog or a punching rig, I'll tie the braid directly to the lure. Otherwise, I'm using a liter of fluorocarbon to make it invisible, at least near the lure where the fish is going to key in on it. But yeah, the key with the frog fishing, give it a second, 2 seconds, set the hook like a maniac, and strap in for a wild fight, because it's a lot of fun. So there you have it, guys. My top 3 topwater lures: the plopping style bait, the popper, and the frog. Walking and popping, but the frog. I just think that there's no more fun way to catch fish than on topwater. And in my opinion, there's no more fun way to catch fish than with these 3 lures. With that plopping style bait, when you get that hit and it comes up and just attacks that plopper, it'll make your heart skip a beat, right? Same with the popper. When you're working that popper the right way and the fish comes up and hits it, and you know that you've done the right thing, it's just watching a fish explode on a lure on the top is just, it's so much fun. It's so exciting. It's probably my favorite way to fish, and so that's why I kind of rambled on about it for so long. But go grab yourself one of each of those types of lures, if not more, and it doesn't matter what brand or anything like that. In general, with topwater, I stick with black, white, and green, because in general, green for the frogs. Everything else, I stick with just black, white. I'll throw some chrome in there sometimes, but across the board, it's generally black or white, which I can get into on a different podcast. We'll talk about lure colors at a different time, but white, black, or like with your frogs, some green, but black and white as well with that. Maybe some chrome here and there on like sunny days. But go grab yourself one of these lures or all of them. Give them a try whenever you get out the next time, and let me know if you catch something big or anything on some topwater. I love hearing about topwater explosions. Like I said, it's my favorite way to fish. It's my favorite thing to talk about, favorite thing to hear about. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Hopefully it was helpful. Thanks for checking out another one, and we will see you on the next episode of Cast and Campfires.